Hello, everyone. Welcome to the web seminar, Intelligence in the Data Center, How Advanced Monitoring Helps Future-Proof Your Infrastructure. This event is produced by Data Center Knowledge and is sponsored by Raritan. Please note that this web seminar will be available on demand for 12 months. Starting tomorrow, you will receive an email when the session is available for review. Also, if you have any questions for our speakers today, please feel free to type them into the question box on your webcast console. We will be taking questions at the end of the session. At this time, I would like to introduce our speakers for today. Bill Clayman is an enthusiastic technologist with experience in data center design, management, and deployment. His architecture work includes large virtualization and cloud deployments, as well as business network design and implementation. As Chief Technology Officer at MTM Technologies, Bill interacts with enterprise organizations and helps align IT strategies with direct business goals. He also publishes freelance white papers, articles, podcasts, and blogs around data center, cloud, security, infrastructure, and many other topics. David Wood is Director, Power Business for Raritan. In this role, David focuses on engaging with customers to provide solutions in energy management, optimizing data center efficiency and uptime. He has more than 20 years of experience in data center energy management, network, and telecommunications technologies. David served as a pilot in the U.S. Navy and earned a BS in electrical engineering from Cornell University. I want to thank everyone for attending today. We're looking forward to a great event. And with that, I will turn things over to Mr. Bill Clayman.
Thank you so much, Dan, and welcome everybody. It is a pleasure to have everyone on board here. Just looking at this title, you guys, you know you're in for a treat. I've seen David's slides. It's going to be a lot of really great information here. Beyond just the structure of a rack, beyond just talking about what a data center looks like, but literally talking about leveraging data, transforming it into information, and really being able to make really cool IT business, and certainly data center decisions as well. So I'm genuinely excited. Now, I know David, and I know I love an interactive audience. We've got a lot of really great people on the line right now. So if you guys can, by all means, pop your questions in to the Q&A section here. There's going to be some time here towards the end for both David and I to cover this. Again, you're going to get a chance to see some really cool stuff here, some statistics and data points which were just released. I'll talk about it in just a second. And you're going to get a chance to learn about some of these really cool technologies that are actually transforming the data center into a smart entity that allows you to grow, ebb and flow with this digital landscape that we're seeing today. But hey, time out. I drank too much coffee this morning. It's pretty clear. Let me kind of set the stage a little bit and then discuss what we're talking about specifically. So coming off of the Data Center World, the AFCOM Data Center World Conference just recently here in San Antonio, where they're going to be playing the Final Four, we had a chance to learn quite a bit. And during the keynote address that I had a chance to actually do, we reviewed the State of the Data Center Industry Report, which we sent out to more than 50,000 people. We got some really cool findings, and you're going to get a chance to see those statistics in just a second. But it's important to make this note very clear at the upfront, right? Data center environments and infrastructure services are only going to continue to evolve and expand in today's digital economy. And what we're seeing is that business needs are the drivers for technological innovation, and new data center solutions are certainly helping push various types of organizations forward. So as more IT environments see the benefit of leveraging the data center model for more use cases, administrators simply need to know how to properly size, manage, and deploy across all of those IT platforms. Here's the thing. Already, new kinds of data center services are pushing the capacity of technology like cloud to the next level. So this is why data center operations are more critical than ever before. And here's the question. What makes a data center run efficiently and, most of all, resiliency? Honestly, it's data center and rack intelligence, being able to look inside of your environment and actually understand what's happening. So today, a lot of data center managers do a good job conserving energy, right? They look forward to decreasing PUE, raising data center temperatures so they can get more efficiency, using things like airside economizers, to reduce energy consumption for cooling. But here's the thing, and you're going to see this in a minute, average power consumption at the rack still going up. And not just at the rack, it's also increasing at the edge. We'll talk about it in a minute. In fact, increased efficiency really means more power is available to the servers to support this increased data growth. So data centers are finding that they must deploy more power into their racks. So ultimately, why is this happening? Managers are deploying more power to their IT environments to keep up with power-hungry devices. So here's the big challenge, and ultimately what we are going to be talking about today. In the digital age of the data center, how are leading IT organizations managing and monitoring their infrastructure? And most of all, how are they injecting intelligence and greater levels of efficiency? So we're going to talk about today's data center, why monitoring is important. You guys are going to get a very, very cool opportunity, I guess no pun intended, to learn about the AFCOM State of the Data Center Report, something that I'm proud to have a chance to have co-authored, to have done the study. And these results are extraordinarily relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. I cannot wait to bring in David Wood to talk about some intelligent monitoring and how to bring that into the data center. That's the final thoughts and summary. Now, in between, just to make sure you guys are paying attention, we're going to have some polling questions. That's right, live polling. We're going to be discussing what you guys are doing. So please make sure that you are keeping an eye on this. Plus, there's going to be a lot of really cool trends and statistics that you're not going to find anywhere else unless you're an AFCOM member, which I do recommend you become, and you actually get this report. So let's get started. And again, one final reminder, pop those questions into the Q&A section of your presentation here, and make sure you ask some really fun questions because, again, David and I are going to get a chance to talk about this. So one of the things that we saw, certainly at the Data Center World Conference, and certainly across the board, is that our world is changing. The data center world is changing. We're seeing public, private cloud. We're certainly seeing a lot more cloud applications, SaaS, users that are remote, the explosion of data, not just from people connecting, but what our data center is generating, and things like the Internet of Things. Now, when it comes to data, what your racks are producing, the information from your DCIM platform, this stuff isn't benign. I need you to understand that. It's excuse me, it's very, very valuable in the sense that you can use this information. And because of this digital revolution, there have been some things happening. We simply can't design data centers the way we used to. And because of things like virtualization, we have to create better building blocks where we can change faster, have better models, and be able to evolve very, very quickly. So in the world, what we're seeing today, we asked a lot of different kinds of questions, right? We wanted to know, and this is specifically relating to the State of the Data Center Survey, we wanted to really find out what organizations are doing out there, and there were some really fascinating responses. So the first question, one of the questions that we asked, was we were curious about data center technology implementation and what organizations are doing to really implement and support their kind of architecture. And guess what their number one response was? DCIM. And to the extent that a lot of them are implementing it right now, many more are implementing it in the future, and then some other ones are going to be considering it over the next 3 years. A lot of this also revolves around things like supporting edge, software-defined data centers, for example, and even organizations doing things like CFD modeling. So we know that organizations and companies are investing in infrastructure management, data center infrastructure management overall. And the key here is that these kinds of data center locations are seeing a boom because of the decentralization of IT, more around edge solutions, and where public cloud isn't the overarching answer for everything. This is why the data centers become even more important, where organizations are investing even greater amounts of dollars to better learn what is their infrastructure doing, how is it supporting their users, what are the use cases, where can there be effective improvements here as well, and how can companies ultimately bridge the gap between some of these digital solutions. So here's the thing. If you're looking at this chart right now, ask yourself the question, am I deploying just DCIM for reactive purposes, or is my infrastructure actually providing value to my organization? And again, to that extent, when we ask, well, what are you actually looking for? What are you trying to cover here with this DCIM deployment? Because we really found that to be extremely fascinating. I mean, take a look at these statistics, right? People are looking at environmental, temperature, humidity statistics. Power management is a big one. And then, kind of going down the line, flash storage, facility management, and so on. So that's the reality. Organizations are trying to create better levels of efficiency, temperature and humidity with their environment, and they're trying to manage power and energy consumption way more effectively. There's a reality to this. And I want everyone to come to kind of fruition with this, on this reality with me and David and everybody on the line here as well. We're breaking the fourth wall here, guys. If you're running a data center and working with your operation, right, one of the things that you might be deploying is things like flashing, hyperconvergence, but ultimately that's going to impact your power management and certainly your environmental variables. How are you managing that today? Is it really reactive? Are you pretty much waiting for an issue to happen before you can jump on it, or are you being more proactive in supporting your users and what they're trying to actually implement? 74% of the people responded they're going to be implementing some kind of environmental management, and 72 said that they're going to be looking at power and energy management to help their data centers become a lot more effective. I mean, look, reduction in data center footprint sometimes could be doing this. Edge computing could be doing this. But the fact of the matter is, there's real world value to managing power and the environmental variables that are inside a data center. Now, I mentioned this earlier, and it's really important to sort of reiterate this point again. The amount of density that we're seeing, rack density in kilowatts, is actually increasing. And you know, we're seeing that the typical respondents estimate a mean of about 16.9 kilowatt rack density in their primary data centers, and 70% report that the rack density has increased over the past 3 years. And here's the thing, 21 said that it increased significantly. We're not going to see this change. Average rack density is going to continue to increase and grow. We're going to see more kinds of solutions impacting the data center model and structure, so things that converge, hyper-converged solutions, the reduction of data center footprint, and leveraging things like all flash. So that level of density inside the rack to support more users and more applications is going to continue and grow as well. So as we look at this and understand what's happening inside of your data centers, it's important to note that rack density isn't going anywhere. And effectively, if you're looking at your own data center right now, whether you're trying to reduce your footprint or you're trying to work with some kind of a new solution, you have to ask yourself the question around power. And what's happening out there, what's actually being done in that data center, and how is it going to ultimately, in fact, impact your organization and certainly what you're doing within your company. Here's the thing, again, this isn't going to stop, and new kinds of solutions are going to be impacting this kind of architecture moving forward. So it's really kind of important to ask the question and really understand where we're going with this. Now, at Data Center World, we found out some really interesting things. Beyond a typical data center, beyond primary locations and co-locations, we found that things like the edge and IoT are going to be impacting rack density and certainly data center design. And here's the thing, people are concerned about this. They're asking questions about this. How do I create a remote or edge infrastructure that's capable of supporting these sorts of demands? Because the reality is this, when you look at IoT, don't think that it's just Bill Clayton, the millennial guy who's got his Amazon Alexa, his Apple Watch, and he loves everything that's connected. That's not entirely true. An aging population is going to be the number one user of IoT, specifically in the healthcare world, right, with sensors, health monitors, and so on. And all of those kinds of technologies need a home, or at least the data does, and that is ultimately going to be the data center, where they're going to be leveraging solutions that are going to be able to support this kind of architecture. Now, we asked this question from the AFCOM State of the Data Center report, and we found out some really, really interesting things. I'm going to stay on this for a little bit. The estimated average power density in edge compute deployments is 6.7 kilowatts per rack. And here's the thing, the vast majority of respondents are indicating that edge is being used to provide capacity for the purpose of enabling IoT. And that's going to continue to grow and evolve. But what was fascinating to ask was that organizations and data center owners across the entire field said that they're investing in edge and that they're investing in better capacity management and power management solutions at the rack level. They're trying to support new kinds of business initiatives, whether it's healthcare trying to build a remote branch location or a branch data center, or maybe healthcare or education, for example, that's trying to support users that are truly, truly remote. This kind of stuff is absolutely going to impact what we do. So I am actually going to take a pause here. I'm going to take a little bit of a deep breath. And I'm going to open it up for a polling question. I'm excited to hear what you guys are going to be talking about and get some of your feedback. So everybody on the line right now, take a look at your screen right now. Put your phone down. That's right. Take a look at the screen. are you using environmental monitoring sensors today? You've got 4 options. Yes, I'm using them. Yes, I'm using them to monitor more than just temperature and humidity. No, but I'm planning to deploy those in the next 12 months. I'm going to give you a second. Maybe you need to think about, maybe you need to ping your data center manager who's maybe on a chat window. But I can't wait to actually take a look at this because I'm really curious to see what people are saying because based on the report, many organizations are trying to get a lot more data out of their data center and certainly a lot more data out of their rack, which is obviously where a lot of the fun happens. So I am going to give it just a couple more seconds here. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to respond. All right, 3, 2, 1. Let's see what people are saying. Man, that's fascinating, right there. So we already see that more than half of you guys are using some kind of an environmental sensor, whether it's just a rack or maybe you're using it more around things like temperature and humidity. I'm glad to see that so many of you. So about 70% of you guys are either using it or planning on using it somewhere in the near future. So I'm actually curious, David, what do you think about these trends and statistics? Well, what are your thoughts on this? Is this kind of accurate? Are you seeing this in the industry?
Hey, Bill, this is David. Yeah, I think this is pretty accurate. I think in our experience at Raritan, we see generally about 50% of our clients will be deploying some type of environmental sensor and primarily temperature and humidity.
Very cool, very cool. And this is something that I'm certainly seeing as well. And this is one of the questions that we asked. Obviously, being able to support edge and other kinds of solutions, working with environmental sensors, that's huge. And they've become so much easier to deploy. I can't stress this enough. David, I don't mean to steal your thunder, but having had set through a bunch of different kind of use cases and scenarios and having had seen these deployed, it's so much easier. And the data you get is so much more valuable. All right, everybody. Let's go to the next question. I hope you guys are still looking at the screen. There we go. You can minimize Facebook. Make sure you're looking up here. I'm curious to ask this question to everybody on the line here. What type of rack PDU, power distribution unit, do you use today? Is it basic? Is it intelligent? Is it intelligent with switching capabilities, or is it a combination of basic and intelligent PDUs? So again, I'm going to give you guys a second here to answer these kinds of questions. But just a note, during our conversations over at Data Center World and throughout the industry in general, the concept of power going into the rack used to be very, I don't mean this word to be negative, but analog, right? Whereas now, this level of power consumption and working with the rack has truly become digital. And again, in the sense that you're capable of leveraging a lot of data and a lot of interesting points to make better decisions around your data center and the stuff that you can put into the rack as well. So just a couple more seconds here. I cannot wait to see what people are going to be responding to this. All right, 3, 2, 1. Hopefully everyone going to have a chance to submit their response. Let's take a look at what you guys said. All right, about more than a quarter you're using basic. I'm happy to see that a whole bunch of folks are using intelligent PDUs. About 15%, about 40 are using a combination. Well, you know what? I'm giving you guys a virtual round of applause. I'm really happy to be seeing this, especially the ones that are using it with some switching capabilities as well. You guys are paving the pathway to a smarter data center. I'm going to take a pause here. David, what do you think about these numbers? Are these indicative of what you're seeing out there? Do they make you happy?
Yeah, I think at least in the North America, this is pretty typical here. If you look at some of the regions outside of North America, you might see a little bit different distribution. Like Asia might use more basic PDUs than roughly 25%. So it's pretty typical. Mm-hmm. But I think that that's a validation of the importance of being able to measure the power that's being used in your data center, and we'll have some really good examples of things of some of our customers and how they're using it.
Very cool, and I really do agree with you more. And if you guys are looking at this and you've got a global presence, this is a chance to ask some really interesting questions here around being able to support a global infrastructure by making your rack smarter. Which honestly, guys, it brings me to my next point. Well, so how do you make your rack smarter? And how do you ultimately work with a data center model that helps improve your overall architecture? So I'm going to put my consulting hat on, and I'm going to give you guys just some advice and some pieces of information that I've gathered throughout the years in working with cloud, data center, virtualization solutions, and actually populating the rack and what goes into those wonderful little 42U and sometimes smaller rack environments. So here's Bill's top 5. Leveraging solutions to create a connected data center. So first of all, Rack Intelligence integrates data center management systems, and that's really important. I mean, that's kind of your step 1 to making your data center even smarter, is by having racks that are able to report back to you, give you information around what's happening, power distribution, what workloads are working where, and even define anomalies in how you're delivering power, and even environmental variables within the rack itself. I mean, again, you don't have to do computational fluid dynamics because they're not cheap. Every single time you move a rack or, remove a crack from your, some kind of an airflow handler from your infrastructure. Again, these kinds of architectures and levels of data let you make better decisions. The other big thing is this: smarter data centers translate to efficiency gains, less outages, and better uptime. Listen, nobody wants to be down. No one wants to, experience an outage or, something happening within the environment. If in fact, there was a recent calculation that said that a data center outage costs the business, I hope you guys are sitting down for this, $8,800 per minute. I'm gonna take a moment there. $8,800 per minute, and the average outage costs around $750,000. So listen, just try these technologies out. Make a smarter data center and data center rack ecosystem, and you're going to be able to see fluctuations in power, workloads that are misconfigured, racks that can be optimized, and all of this happens before you have to, sweat bullets and try and bring stuff back up. So again, this level of intelligence in the data center really does help you sleep better at night and gives you your weekends back. And that brings me to the next point. Number 3, connected data center systems provide insight, data, and actionable information. So that's important to understand because we talk about data a lot, and we talk about data a lot at Data Center World. And the one thing that I wanted to emphasize and everybody in here as well is that data is great, but if there's too much of it and you don't know what to do with it, it's not going to be ultimately useful. So creating an intelligent rack or a better data center infrastructure management system allows you to take that data and create actionable information, actionable steps. So being able to report on things, create thresholds and alerts and alarms, and be able to actually work with an ecosystem that's capable of responding to business demands. Please understand that being reactive in the data center world can be very, very costly, especially today, and that so many more systems rely on what you're doing in the data center model than ever before. Number 4, connected data centers and racks support evolving digital demands for users in the business. I'm going to keep this one short and sweet. Converged infrastructure, hyperconvergence, virtual desktops, virtual applications, IoT, etc. Insert your fun marketing name here for all the cool stuff that's coming out every single day. But connected data centers don't leave a lot of room for guessing, which is something you don't want to do with new sorts of digital requirements. And in that sense, you are directly integrating with business and business development use cases. Again, where you can do a lot of great things by leveraging data and, again, creating actionable steps. This one, I really want everyone to take away from this. An intelligent rack, right, and I know David's going to talk about it in a minute, is way more than just PDU or power distribution. They support the management and maintenance of critical IT systems. And again, as you look at this and better understand it, I've seen leading IT professionals, data center professionals, use intelligent DCIM tools where they're able to leverage data and gather information to go to their business leaders, ask for more dollars, present new business use cases, help them understand how their data center is actually working by providing something that business people love, numbers, right? Numbers and actual information points to show where you're creating efficiency and where you're improving the bottom line. Way more than just power distribution. So definitely think about it from a data center perspective. Now, when it comes to the rack itself, there's a lot of really cool things that you can leverage and do, right? Temperature, humidity control, connecting into the network, and again, moving beyond that. So you're creating things like the smart rack, working with intelligent power distribution. You have smart sensors. If you can see those, they're like on the right side of the rack, in the middle, high, and the low parts of the rack, that give you so much detail around the actual environment and what it can do in your infrastructure. And again, you're creating this level of intelligent asset management as well, where you can monitor and manage what's going into the rack and how it's being pulled out. Again, no more lost assets. And from a security perspective, that's kind of important. And here's the big one. You're actually integrating your intelligent rack and what goes into the rack with your DCIM infrastructure. And I really can't stress this one enough because at this point, you really are creating an engine for growth, efficiency, and integration with the business. From the examples that I saw at Data Center World, some of these new innovations, obviously data, I can't wait for you to talk about what you guys are doing at Raritan and what you guys are actually being able to accomplish there. Definitely excited about that, but this is what people are investing into. And if your data center right now or your rack is functioning great, right, let's pretend like there's no issues, but you don't have insight into it. How are you able to provide value? How do you know where you can create great levels of efficiency? Let me kind of point this out to you. Just because it works doesn't mean it's necessarily bringing you value. So this is where you get an opportunity to integrate with DCIM, have a much smarter data center ecosystem. And again, what you're able to do here is actually support even more kinds of business use cases. So I'm gonna stop here because I'm just way too excited about David's section here. Actually understanding the technologies which bring intelligence into the data center. And so with that, just to kind of cover it more, I promise I'll be back in a little bit. And if you have any questions for David or myself, by all means, pop those in the Q&A. We are going to have time at the end to answer those, so make sure you stick around. I'm going to have some really cool final statistics from Data Center World and the state of the data center as well that's going to show where the mind of the data center leader is and how they're looking ahead at some really, really cool technology solutions. So with that, I'm going to sit back and enjoy this part of the presentation. David, the floor is yours.
All righty. Thanks, Bill. That's really, really interesting information you have there, and a massive survey that's got to represent a lot of people with a ton of experience. So I think it's really exciting. And the only thing I'm missing here is actually a cup of that coffee that you had, and I want to find out who's roasting that so I can get some. So anyway, I just I want to talk to you about some intelligence in the data center today. And there's really so much to think about, plan for, and deal with in the day-to-day business of a data center manager. I mean, just look at all the things that are changing, the technologies that are being introduced, the drivers of technology is just continually changing. So it's really quite a responsibility. And so today what I want to do is talk to you about what practical problems actually occur in data centers, how they can be identified and resolved, and then give you some examples of some of our customers at Raritan who have solved these problems, and give you an idea. Maybe there's some things that you can gain from this. So. Okay, so data center and basically data center and facilities managers, they face a ton of questions every single day. And these are just some of the questions that they have. And they basically need to be assessing how their data center is functioning. And they need to be on the lookout for potential problems. And then, they've got to do a lot of planning to determine where they can deploy new IT assets, and just figure out how they're going to get new cabinets and lay out their data center. And they just have so many things that they need to worry about. So they may be asking questions like, do I really have enough power available in my data center, in my circuits, running from my remote power panel to the cabinet, that I can actually deploy new cabinets, and do I have enough power on my PDU where I can deploy more assets within the cabinet? Do I really understand whether my cooling is functioning the way I expect it to? So I don't want to overcool, I don't want to undercool, but I need to make sure that I'm just right. So I need some instrumentation maybe to help me. And then I look at things like, well, what kind of capacities do I have? Because I'm planning space, I'm planning power, I'm planning cooling, and capacity. I built a data center. I've made an investment, very expensive investment, and I want to make sure that I'm utilizing it very, very effectively. So if it's underutilized, that's going to be a big challenge. So I think there's also considerations when you look at, do I have the right failover redundancy in my infrastructure? And so if you have no intelligence in your cabinets, in the PDUs, and in your environmental monitoring, you really are getting snapshots in time. Maybe you're looking at reading current readings on PDUs, which tells you at that moment. Or maybe you're doing some kind of temperature monitoring that gives you a snapshot at that one instance. But really, it doesn't tell you what's happening over time. So in this dynamic environment, because of all the change occurring, I think data center managers really need to be equipped with the proper tools that are going to help them to manage the data center, and they need to be proactive about it. They can't wait for something to happen and react to it. They've got to be on top of it. And so there's a lot of different reasons why data center managers need to pay attention. In being able to monitor and manage the data center, you'll be able to address these different reasons. So if you look at some of these reasons, Bill mentioned in the survey that power densities are going up. And that's been true over the years. We see different performance in power densities. Some clients may be deploying some very high densities in a portion of their data centers where they have maybe 6 kW in most of their cabinets, and maybe they have some high performance compute or some other types of high power densities, 15 kWs or higher in certain aspects of their data center. And they just really need to understand that they have enough power, they don't want to overload circuits, and they want to make sure that they're utilizing the capacity. We continually hear about data centers increasing the operating temperatures within the data center. And this is a great way to save money, but you've got to be careful and understand exactly where all of your cabinets and your device temperatures are, what's the temperature that they're experiencing, so that you can be confident about the way you're operating that data center, and you can increase that temperature with accuracy. Bill talked about the cost of downtime. I mean, it's amazing. $8,800 a minute is ridiculous. And I think the other thing is on the human side is really, this is a potential job killer. And it's not anybody's job, it's your job. So this is a very sensitive one here. And then if we look at deployments for data centers, we do see a shift in more colo deployment and less enterprise new builds of data centers. And so even within a colo, you might say, hey, the colo is responsible for my environment. Why do I have to care? And the reason why you might want to care is that you do need to know you're paying them. You have a service level agreement, and if you want to trust them to do the right thing, that's great. But I think if you're able to instrument it, it gives you the confidence that they're actually performing the way you need them to, and you can be proactively managing different situations there. Bill also talked about the edge and how there's more distributed compute environments today. And in fact, the power densities in those edge deployments can be very high. So now you don't have the capability to go to every single location. And so having ability to remotely manage at these edge sites will become more critical. And there's a number of different regulations out there, whether it's PCI or HIPAA, that might affect how you manage each cabinet and whether you need to know who's in the cabinet or who's not in the cabinet. So I'm going to talk a little bit about free cooling later in one of our customer examples, but that is certainly becoming more widely deployed. We continually see different regions throughout the world that have environments and weather conditions that would give you optimum free cooling performance, and so it's becoming so widely deployed. And so I think the benefit for having some ability to monitor is that you do know how efficient you are, and you can be confident again whether you're cooling properly. Along with the free cooling, we do see a containment being deployed more and more, and even with deployment, there's potential for leakage, whether you have blanking panels, you need to be confident that containment is actually working for you the way you expected and nothing has changed there, especially when you're talking about some of these remote sites. And then finally, there are tightening budgets because data center, in order to operate a data center, it's become so much more expensive. And so there's fewer and fewer personnel at each of these data centers, and yet there's more focus on effectively managing it. So it's like a double whammy. You have fewer people and you have more focus on how it's being managed. So maybe there's a way that you can actually help yourself with this. So I know in a lot of the AFCOM show you mentioned, Bill, was they talked a lot about data center automation. And so I think when we look at the offering, there's a lot of capability to help you to automate. And this is using some of these monitoring tools in the new data centers. And intelligence is really the key thing to help you, because intelligence really means that you have ability to network a rack PDU, let's say, with different instrumentation. And I think if you look at good, the best in class designs for PDU designs, it's really not just about power distribution, but it's about intelligence. And it's about being able to leverage the investment that you put in a cabinet by having a rack PDU, and you have a reliable source of power and able to manage it effectively, but also you're able to instrument other areas of the cabinet that might be important to you, like environmental monitoring. So if we look at intelligent rack power distribution, it's otherwise known as rack PDU. It's really a network device that enables the data center manager to remotely monitor and control all of their power usage. And they come in a variety of different flavors. There are different types of metering, whether you're metering at the inlet, which gives you an idea of what your cabinet IT load is, or maybe you're metering at the circuit breaker so that you can fully utilize the capacity of each of the branch circuits that's on your rack PDU, or even down to the outlet level that gives you this granularity and helping you to measure the individual loads for IT devices. So as you plug a server into a particular receptacle on a rack PDU, you'll be able to monitor that power at that outlet, and you know exactly how much power is being consumed by that particular device. And I'll explain some customer use cases where that is very, very critical. So in addition to this different types of metering for a intelligent rack PDU, there's also the ability to do switching. So you can switch the power on and off at each of the outlets. And there's really a couple of reasons, two primary reasons that this switching is used. The most common use is actually to secure the outlet so that there's no unintentional load being plugged into the device. And this gives you the ability to control what devices are powered in every cabinet. So if you shut the outlet off and there's no power available, it doesn't matter how many times you plug into that outlet, there's no draw on the circuits and you won't be changing what you're expecting. So this way you can really manage change more effectively. The second reason for having switching is really to be able to remotely manage that outlet and that device that's connected to it, so you could cycle power and reboot devices if needed. So this might be really important in a remote site, edge deployment, or even a colo deployment, say. So I think the other key monitoring tool here is environmental monitoring. And really, the primary ways that data center managers are doing this is deploying temperature and humidity sensors within the cabinet. Those sensors can be deployed. They're just really simple. Just plug them in, and they start metering right away. And it's very simple. It's just basically a plug-and-play type deployment. These hardwired sensors mean that you don't have to replace batteries, and you have a very reliable connection, so you know that you can monitor the environment using that rack PDU, which is networked. And so there's other types of sensors that can be deployed, but temperature and humidity is the primary one. You can do other types like air pressure, differential pressure, even water leakage, and different other types of sensors. So I think the last thing that I want to mention here is going to be power monitoring software. And really, this is very commonly used. I think we saw that in Bill's data that he showed earlier, that's one of the most common tools being deployed in the data center today. And really, once you get beyond a certain number of intelligent rack PDUs, it starts to help consolidate all of the information, giving you more insight into what's actually happening in your data center. So you have the ability to instrument the data center with the rack PDU, and the power monitoring software is a nice complement to give you the ability to utilize that data and give you the insights and help you to make the best decisions that you possibly can. That power monitoring software, can be supplied by the intelligent PDU vendors, or even consider some open architectures for rack PDU, because you may want to have your own tool implemented. And so that would be important that you don't have a proprietary architecture that prevents you from doing that. These other types of monitoring listed here will help you in other cases, but we're going to focus on these for now. So I think we're going to switch into some of the customer examples. I have about 4 of them to talk to you about today. The first one I want to talk about was something called the AFCOM Leaders Lab. And this was something that was recently done by AFCOM, and where they gathered a number of different industry experts. These are data center managers, facility managers who are out in the real world. And this particular topic was on energy efficiency. And if you look at data centers today, I think that data centers consume about 1.8% of the total energy consumed in the United States. So when you think about all the people, all of the economy, all of the industries using energy, 1.8% is a very significant amount of the total energy that's consumed. And, as Bill mentioned, the number of devices, I thought that was a really interesting comment about how, we think that it's millennials with, just different, smartphones and whatnot, but it really the older generation where healthcare monitoring is becoming more and more important, and I thought that was very fascinating. So I think with all of these devices, we keep seeing these massive numbers and the hockey stick growth and the different types of connected devices. And it's I don't know if those numbers are correct, but I think that we all know that the number is going to increase. And so this total energy consumption is really, how do we effectively use that energy and not waste it, and that we're not throwing money out the window by wasting it. So these Leader Lab participants came from all over a different data center industry, and it was some exercises that we went through and looking at basically using PUE as a baseline measurement. And this was a good way to take a look at how each of the data centers was performing. It wasn't really a comparison from one data center to the other, but more for a baseline for your own data center. And they were real-world scenarios. And the group really focused on this repeatable process that helped to measure the energy efficiency and really try to get to a point where you could determine what areas could be improved. And so it was all about controlling the energy consumption and reducing cost. And so most of the businesses that were involved, all of the businesses involved, were really about a quick payback opportunities, and there's really a lot of opportunities when you dig into it. So there was a very simple process that was used. Basically, it's measuring the key areas of energy consumption, digging deeper into why the energy is being consumed, and then, like, last step would be determining what steps you take in order to achieve that energy efficiency and the cost reduction or the utilization improvement. So one of the things that I noted in that Leaders Lab was there's really some key things going back to the basics. And back to the basics in environmental monitoring is really understanding things like ASHRAE standards. And so you can see a row of cabinets here where there's a temperature and humidity sensor located in each of these cabinet elevations. And it's giving different temperatures depending on where it's located within that. Without that instrumentation available, you don't really have any idea about how things are performing with the reliability. And so ASHRAE recommends that you deploy those sensors in the top, middle, bottom, and the front and the back of the rack, and that way you've got your rack fully monitored and instrumented so that you've got a consistent picture. It's a good process to use, and it gives you a measurement where you can establish a baseline and help you to detect when there's some abnormal condition there. So one of the things that the Leaders Lab really came out with for a big opportunity in many cases for these real-world scenarios was actually utilizing the max number of free cooling days. So they weren't taking advantage of the environment that's free and it's here and it's around us. And this was an easy way, but the key was being able to monitor the environment around your cabinets to make sure that the IT devices are properly cooled. So the next customer example is a university, and I think we have some universities on the webinar today. But this university, probably like a lot, are in the process of really looking at their budgets. And in this case, there was a need to have consolidation of the facility. And so there were a number of different data centers consolidated down to make the space into a single data center with a DR site. And so there was a lot of transition throughout the campus, moving data devices from different places and establishing this new centralized data center. And so as that was happening, it was really important to monitor the operations because the data center managers needed to make sure that the university clients were really getting what they're paying for and that they were receiving the compute resources that they needed. So the outlet metering was really critical for them. And they also did some instrumenting with the environmental sensors. So here you can see a thermal map that shows the performance of a typical data center that has a row of cabinets, and you can see the different, you can see how temperature is performing in that data center. Our next customer case was with a media content provider. And this particular content provider had a lot of different data centers, huge investment in different spaces throughout the country, and has a tremendous budget for using power and cooling. And so they were really needed to understand how they most effectively could use that. So the key for them in their intelligent deployment was utilizing outlet level metering. And this helped them to benchmark devices and plan new deployments and optimize that space, power, and cooling that they had. So they actually used the outlet level metering, and they had a three-step process that they used to benchmark devices. The initial step, if they had never used that type of device, was actually to use a percentage of a nameplate power consumption. Once they deployed a device and they were monitoring it with the outlet metering, they were able to start measuring over time, and they could establish a baseline using that measurement there. So in this case, they have a rack elevation where they were planning a device in that particular rack that's shown. And they could do this confidently because they knew exactly how much power that device would be consuming, and they were sure that the circuit that it was running on had enough capacity. Our next client was a social media company which was utilizing data centers throughout the globe, and each of those data centers was deployed in different colo sites. And so being in a colo site, they didn't have hands on site, and they needed to be able to monitor them from remote sites. And so utilizing outlet level metering and switching in the ways that I mentioned before was key for them in order to be able to monitor those colo sites. I'm showing you an enterprise dashboard of different data center sites, and it gives you a quick health check and showing you the red, green, or yellow status depending on whether you have maybe some critical events that are turning your tile here to red. In this particular case, their outlet metering was very useful in helping them to build back to the different departments that were within their company so that they were able to properly allocate the cost of operating the data center. Our last customer was a not-for-profit firm, and in this case, they had a very limited space available, and so it was key for them to utilize that space the most efficiently that they could. And so they actually deployed 30 kW per rack. So Bill, I think your data set showed, I don't know, maybe 4% was 10 kW and above, or maybe it was 15. These guys were in that 4%, pumping it out at 30 kW. So it's a really high power density, and it was important for them to be able to monitor the power, and more importantly was that they had, this is a 400 volt infrastructure at 60 amps, so it's really, really serious power. And so in order to deliver that power, you sometimes need a unique design in your rack PDU, and a customized design can get you exactly what you need there. So this is how they deployed. Okay, I think we're getting there. So I think just to kind of wrap up things up, when we talk about future proofing, it's really about planning for the future. And in order to plan, you need to be able to anticipate all these different activities, and you need to be able to plan those deployments of new devices in your data center and have a clear picture of what's going on in the environment so that you can see when things are changing, and they're changing all the time, but you need to know when they're changing, and you need to take some action so that you prevent something bad from happening. And so this intelligence gives you the way to instrument so that you have real-time power consumption and environmental monitoring. And so with intelligent rack PDU and using those temperature humidity sensors and environmental monitoring and the right software tool, this gives you a really complete view of your infrastructure, and it lets you see how you're using your resources in that really important investment that you've made in the data center. I think one thing that is key amongst all of our users is actually alerting. And alerting is setting a threshold on these different metering points, whether it's environmental or power or even door positions. And once a threshold is crossed, you can receive an alert via an SNMP trap, and it will inform you that something's changing, and then you can take action and look into it. So there's really a lot of opportunity to instrument and take advantage of that intelligence. So I think lastly, there's all these resources that you have deployed. Your company's made a huge investment. Some basic intelligence and instrumentation really will give you the insight that you need to make the best decisions. And I say, don't let downtime ruin your day. Just be proactive. So I'm going to turn that back over to you, Bill.
Thank you so much, David. And, you guys are going to get a chance to take something away here. One final thought here, the status of data center services. Before I talk on that, David, you brought up a lot of really good points there, and a lot of ways that we can integrate our data center environment to just become a lot smarter and have the ability to do greater things with it as well. You brought up that AFCOM Leaders Lab on energy and efficiency. I mean, obviously that was a big one. I actually led the one here in Chicago on basically disaster recovery and preparedness. And honestly, one of the things that we took a look at was improving uptime by managing the rack more intelligently. and being able to integrate better levels of information gathering around the rack as well. So there's a lot of things happening. Now, before we go into the Q&A, one final thought. We asked this question of our AppCom members, and then we sent out the Data Center Knowledge members as well. And this is what we got back. This is the future that data center operators and managers are looking to, right? Working with data analytics, leveraging big data, machine learning, and certainly AI. 52% are currently doing things around data analytics, and a lot of those guys are integrating their DCIM platforms and being able to do things like proactive monitoring, understanding what's happening in the environment. So the future is a lot smarter with a very intelligent data center architecture. And as you saw David talk about, not just the use cases, but the actual technologies that go into the architecture as well, those are critical. And those are really important to not just understand, but to try them out. And that's the one thing I would absolutely implore everyone. You know, Raritan obviously does a great job here. And try these sensors out, put them in your environment, see how well they integrate with your DCIM infrastructure. That's, one of the best things you can do for the health of your data center. And so with that, I'm going to pause here and pass it back to the amazing Dan Blunk and see if we've got any questions from our audience. And by the way, you guys do have a few minutes to pop a few of those in there. So take it away, Dan.
Thank you very much, Bill, and thank you, David, as well. As Bill noted, we do have about 4 minutes for Q&A, which isn't a lot of time, but please submit your questions. If we do not get to them on the live event, we will circle back to you afterward. Let's go ahead and get started. So an attendee has asked, what advice would you give a data center manager interested in adding smart rack monitoring?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. The advice I would give the data center manager is really to look at what are the particular problems that he's trying to solve in his data center and try to prioritize what those are. So if he has needs an insight into capacity management, if he's having outages and overload conditions in his infrastructure, or he's got different cooling, that might help steer him in a direction on where he should focus. But I think if you look back at the material that we covered, there's really a lot of different opportunity that can be a little bit overwhelming. So it might help to kind of prioritize what problems you're trying to solve. And then you can go from there, adding that intelligence into your monitoring for the data center.
Great, thank you. We have time for just one or two more questions here. Another attendee asked, would you give us some examples of how data centers are using machine learning technologies?
Yeah, so let me take that one a little bit. So definitely it's a newer sort of architecture, but a lot of organizations believe that when you're increasing intelligence and automation of physical infrastructure and equipment, as well as management, you're creating greater levels of efficiency and use within the operations. So some of the things that we're seeing, for example, for those tasked with managing buildings and critical facilities, machine learning and being able to have levels of predictability offer the promise of greater operational insight, automation, much easier scalability, and direct integration into management. And obviously, you're going to improve system reliability and energy efficiency as well. So what machine learning allows you to do is understand data points that are happening within the environment, correlate them, and give you better insight. So the environment is literally learning as you process and as you grow. And what's amazing is that you're able to function and work with your specific rack environments, understand your cooling, for example, and aggregate all of this data into some kind of a process that allows you to really gain even more value of your architecture. Remember, you're trying to be more proactive. Machine learning solutions integrate with AI and certainly big data, but most of all, data center architectures that allow you to aggregate various types of data points so you can create a much better map. So look for this stuff to come in much more than it is right now. I think it's a newer technology, but definitely something that's on the mind of data center operators.
Thanks, Bill. Let's take one more. We're going to have to do pretty briefly, but an attendee's asked, may I get a quick idea about how you monitor the equipment in a rack? I understand the rest, but I use manual process to create and update rack elevations.
Okay, so I think that this question is around asset management. So I showed you some of those rack elevation screenshots, which is really Sunbird Software offers a DSIM package called DC Track and Power IQ that helps you to do this. And so there's a close integration with the Raritan Intelligent PDU and the Sunbird software that actually gives you the ability to track those assets at the RU level within a cabinet. So it's an automated way where you have an asset tag connected to the device. There's a unique serial number that connects to an asset strip in the cabinet that's connected to the intelligent PDU. And when that's connected, it communicates with the DSIM software to let it know what's been attached. And so it will help you to create that elevation. So that's just one example of its use.
Great. I want to thank, unfortunately we are out of time for this session, but thanks Bill and David for your presentations. Thank you to Raritan for sponsoring today's event. Just a quick reminder, this seminar will be available on demand starting tomorrow, so you can feel free to come back and review. To learn more about Raritan, there is a link in the resource tab along with the slides from today's session, so please go ahead and feel free to review that. And with that, we will sign off. Thank you all for attending, and we hope you have a great day.